What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and today we are going to be going over the complete history of Captain Jack Sparrow. I'm going to quickly go over what you can be expecting in this video, and then I'm just going to jump right in. This video is going to be looking at Jack's life from the very beginning, from his birth all the way through until we get into the movies, and then also talking about the movies. This is a complete history, so we are going to talk about his part in all of the movies, including what he was doing in between the movies. This is also going to cover some of the things explained in the movies or talked about briefly that we don't really know a whole lot about. I'm going to go into detail about that. And I'm also going to put his encounter with Salazar that we see in Dead Men Tell No Tales trailer. I'm going to place that in the timeline of his life. So, without further ado, here we go. This isn't going to be a numbing, just going over fact after fact after fact. I'm going to leave quite a few things out. Things I don't think are necessarily that important. I want to get right to it. I want to talk about what he was doing, the biggest things, talk about his biggest moments. And then we can talk about it more in the comments if you have anything you want to ask me about it. But we're just going to go right through his life, some of the bigger moments, but not talk about everything. Jack Sparrow. From the age of Johnny Depp, which is a lot of people's way of telling Jack Sparrow's age and from when he was born, we can estimate he was born in 1700. He was born on a pirate ship in the middle of a typhoon. He was born to an unknown mother, an unknown female, and his father, Edward Teague. Now, he didn't actually know that this was his father. For quite some time, there was a lot of debate as to who Jack's father really was. It was kind of hush-hush. They both had a sense of who it was, that they both knew, he was his son and he was the father. They both kind of knew that, but they weren't absolutely sure. One thing was sure, Jack had an immediate affection for being a pirate. He immediately wanted to follow in his supposed father's footsteps and be captain of a ship. He didn't want to be just like a follower pirate. He always wanted to be kind of in command. He always liked the term captain. As you can tell in the movies, he hates it actually when you don't include his name, Captain. He always wants to be called Captain Jack Sparrow. Jack started off his life in his earlier years as basically a cabin boy. He traveled from ship to ship. He didn't really have an actual ship he stayed on for too long. He kind of jumped around several pirate ships and met people during that. So eventually this cabin life didn't exactly do it for Jack. He had that in his life. He was doing that for quite some time, jumping back and forth, going to different ports and learning different locations with his father. He accompanied his father to a bunch of places, including Singapore. This is the first time he went to the location of Singapore. But then eventually Jack kind of got bored and got tired of this basic pirate life. Because again, he wanted the term captain. He wanted to be more than just a generic cabin boy. Now, we're not going to go into the specifics of Jack's younger age adventures. I don't want to get too caught up in minute specifics. I think it kind of would get a little bit boring. It would be more of me just reading it off to you. But Jack did dabble in supernatural elements and supernatural beings throughout his entire life, starting at a very young age. The Sword of Cortez was one of them. That he met and had talks with Tia Dalma back then. He's been around the block and he's done several things. He actually met mermaids before, and they also did the song just like they did on Stranger Tides. And Jack actually was not seduced by their song. The rest of the crew was, but Jack actually proved to be unbreakable when it came to that. Because when mermaids sing, they prey on the desire of man to be attracted to them. And Jack's only desire was freedom. He talks about freedom a lot in the movies, especially in the first one. And so that's his only desire. So he was not swayed by the mermaid song. But he had encounters with them in the past. Jack had other adventures, including a meetup with Davy Jones before the whole Black Pearl deal. It was involving Fitzwilliam's watch, which actually controlled time, which is a very interesting thing that actually can control time, because Tyler and I were talking about a potential Pirate 789 with a device that would be able to control time, but he also had that part of him too. Next up is actually his first encounter with Josh McGibbs, his longtime friend. It kind of dates back to another person that was close to Jack, Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III. He was close to Jack. He ended up being a spy, working for the Royal Navy. He gave Jack and Captain Teague over to the Royal Navy, in which Gibbs actually, as we know, was working for them. You saw that in Pirates 1, and Gibbs freed Jack and Captain Teague. That's where they first got their admiration for each other. That's where Jack first talked to him. And so that's kind of where you could place the first meeting of the two. It's also where James Norrington first comes in, but I don't think Jack and Norrington actually had that much of an encounter, especially because in the first one it seems as if they've never seen each other before. They were both kind of in the same location, but they never actually saw each other. Now we start getting into the kind of specifics of where Jack starts to grow up. When he was younger, he did have a lot of mystical adventures and whatnot, but he was kind of just getting into the game. Now we get to the point where Jack actually is going to start doing things. So this is around the late 1720s. So Jack, he's in his 20s at this point. This is when he receives the compass from Teodalmo, which will become important in my placing of Salazar. So he gets the compass. He goes to Shipwreck Cove with his father, and he meets the pirate lords. At this point, they still were not ready to recognize Jack as Teague's son. He still didn't want that known. But Jack did meet the pirates at Shipwreck Cove. This is when Jack first met Hector Barbossa. Barbossa was there at the meeting of the Brethren Court. He was a pirate captain at the time, and his ship, which was called the Cobra, was destroyed by these mysterious rogue pirates. Now, Jack also had information on these rogue pirates, and so Jack, in this way, developed a friendship with Barbossa, because he ended up having knowledge that helped Barbossa solve this issue. So this was the first time Jack ever met Barbossa, was when they both met at Shipwreck Cove. They actually were both there at the same time. Like I said, Jack found the information. Jack figured out who it was that destroyed Barbossa's ship. The Brethren Court actually calls upon Davy Jones again to help them out. So Davy Jones has always kind of been around here, which is very interesting in that respect. Now is where I kind of want to get to tying in where the movies meet this early life Jack. So we have this whole Brethren Court ideal, right? So Jack goes to the Brethren Court. This is not at the point yet where he becomes a pirate lord. That does happen, but it comes in later. Barbossa is, as far as we know, not yet a pirate lord, but they're both pirate captains in a sense. Jack, not so much. Barbossa, definitely. Barbossa's a little bit older. So they both meet at Shipwreck Cove. Jack helps Barbossa out by basically just giving information. He doesn't actually do anything with Barbossa yet. But now is where I want to insert the Salazar thing, okay? Because this is the only place that it makes sense to me, because after this we're going to get into tying up what Beckett was talking to Jack about in At World's End. This is where I think the whole Salazar thing happened. It could have been before this Brethren Court meeting with Jack and with Barbossa. It needed to happen after Jack got the compass, which is around the exact same time that all this is happening. Jack gets the compass, and at some point Jack does go to find the Trident of Poseidon. He makes it to the Devil's Triangle, and that is where he encounters Salazar, and that is where that whole situation happens. That is in his early years. Now, there's no explicit place that any of the canon or any of the reading or research I've done would indicate this is the actual spot. There's no actual confirmation. This is my opinion, judging from the fact that when Salazar talks about how he saw this boy, Jack Sparrow, he mentions it being a boy. Jack technically didn't even have to be captain at this point of that ship. What's most important is that he is referred to as a boy. He does look very young in the trailer, and he has the compass. But this is before the slave trade and before getting the Black Pearl. This was earlier time. So this was, in fact, before Jack made the deal with Davy Jones. This was before all of that. This is in this time period. After this Brethren Court meeting, we get kind of another betrayal with Jack. Jack had another friend. They worked together for a little while, but then his friend kind of said, you know what, I don't need you anymore. And Jack ended up basically in the hands of the East India Trading Company with Cutler Beckett. And for around 5 years, Jack served his will. Jack worked in the East India Trading Company. He was very loyal, very faithful to the company, which is good because that's what Beckett really needs with him. So Jack was a first mate to a captain of one of these East India Trading Company ships. And when the captain was killed, Jack became the new captain. So this is really Jack's first time in control of a ship. Beckett was very impressed by what Jack did to get out of that situation because they had a fight, and that's where the captain actually was killed, and then Jack took over and saved the day, basically. So Cutler Beckett was very impressed with this, and made Jack, or offered him, to take command of a slave trade ship, of a slave ship. And Jack refused. He didn't want to do anything with slavery, which at this point isn't really a problem because he's kind of just starting to do that. It will become more of a problem later. So he doesn't want to transport slaves, but Beckett gives him the Wicked Wench, which is a merchant vessel for the East India Trading Company. Now, Jack immediately fell in love with this ship. He really loved it, and they made a great team. They were a fantastic duo. Jack had a lot of, not luck, he had a lot of success in captaining the Wicked Wench. They were unbeatable. He did a lot of things for Beckett in this Wicked Wench. He got a lot. He also started to do more mystical things. This is where it starts to get messy, though. Beckett kind of makes it so Jack doesn't know that he's starting to be a slave trader. He wants Jack to go find a mystical island. He wants Jack to do all this stuff with gold and treasure. And eventually, with this whole mystical adventure and with an island, Jack makes it very clear to Beckett that he's not going to tell him what he found on this very important voyage that he set out to, that Beckett made him go to. He doesn't really report back to Beckett where this island is and who the people are, because he really started to get an understanding of these people. He really liked them, and he really didn't want to give them up because he knew Beckett was going to use them as slaves. And as we know from Pirates 3 and the deleted scenes, Jack does not like the slave trade. Men aren't cargo, was his words. I think it's a very telling point of Jack Sparrow in that sense. Jack was no longer just a worker for the company. Jack became a traitor to the company, and Beckett did not like that. He didn't like that Jack wouldn't sell out, basically, these people. And for that, Beckett wanted to make his presence known on Jack. He had his operative, his next in command, basically, Mercer, Ian Mercer, who we saw, who's his second up in Pirates 2 and 3. Him and Mercer branded Jack a pirate, put the P on his arm, and also destroyed the Wicked Wench right in front of Jack. Burned it, set it ablaze with a cannon that was sparked, and so it would literally just blow up the entire ship, and it sunk to the bottom of the ocean with Jack watching. Now, what happens after is actually very interesting. Jack actually goes after the ship. He actually dives into the water and goes down there to get the ship. And he kind of falls into this stasis where he's stuck down there. He really loves that ship, and when he's in this kind of no man's land, a lot like actually Bootstrap Bill was in between this life and death thing, Davy Jones appears to him, and Jack makes the dreaded deal. Davy Jones will resurrect the Wicked Wench, and Jack will captain it for 13 years, and then he will serve a century of servitude aboard Davy Jones's ship, the Flying Dutchman. Now, Jack really had no intention of following this up. As we kind of know from him, he's sneaky in that way. He had no intention to fulfill his end of the bargain. But Davy Jones did trust him enough to do it at the time. He resurrected the Wicked Wench. And Jack, inspired by a biblical parable, the Pearl of Great Price, he renamed it the Black Pearl. And then he started off into his pirate adventure. Now, this is when we really get to see Jack as a pirate. This is really when he takes his next steps. He is the captain of a very powerful ship, the fastest ship in the seas. He made the deal with Davy Jones. He's done with his life with Beckett, and he becomes a captain, something he's always wanted. This is where he meets Angelica, actually. He has run-ins with Angelica. And this is also when Jack becomes a pirate lord. Captain Teague, Edward Teague, his father, was actually a pirate lord before him, but he stepped aside to become the keeper of the code, and in his place left an empty seat. So Jack took that empty seat, and Jack chose the Caribbean Sea as his domain. Teague was originally the pirate lord of Madagascar, but Jack chose the Caribbean as his part of it. He tied his piece of 8 into his hair, left it dangling over his bandana. That was where he put it. This is also around the time where he got the tattoo of the Sparrow on his wrist. So, now we get to where we start to get very close to Pirates 1. Jack finds himself a crew. He names Hector Barbossa his first mate. At this point, Barbossa is also a pirate lord, and Jack includes him in, and they start sailing off and having all sorts of adventures. They actually do have a couple mystical sorts of meetings before the dreaded, mutiny that happens to them. So after their first kind of encounter with supernatural elements, they set off for the gold of Cortez. Jack never got to see the end of this, obviously. He never got to see the end product. This is when the crew mutinied against him, led by Barbossa. Barbossa took the Black Pearl. Jack was left on an island with just a pistol with one shot. Jack escapes the island. He never got part of the gold, but that's also good because that means he was not included in the curse. Barbossa, the entire crew, including Bootstrap Bill, took the treasure. Bootstrap Bill did not like this either. He was sent down to the bottom of the ocean where he eventually made a deal with Davy Jones, but not before sending his piece of Aztec gold to Will Turner to leave the rest of Barbossa and his crew forever cursed. So Jack never got cursed. But in this time, Jack started making his name, and even before this, he really started making his name as this elusive Captain Jack Sparrow. There were stories of him all over the place of what he was doing, of how he escaped the island. Nobody really knew, but there were all sorts of stories about him, and his number one goal was, of course, getting the pearl back and killing his first mate Barbossa for doing what he did to Jack. He saved the pistol with one shot for Barbossa. So then we get into Pirates 1. He makes his way and he meets Will Turner, and they form an uneasy alliance, but Jack really, he's still after Barbossa. They make it to the Isla de Muerta, where they find the Aztec gold, where Barbossa tries to, the first time at least, to lift the curse. Doesn't work. Jack makes a deal. He's always making deals, right? He's always working both sides. Ultimately, though, Jack plays a really big role in ultimately the demise of Barbossa. He tricks him by allying himself to Barbossa at the end of Curse of the Black Pearl, which was also a trick. And then ultimately, Will cuts his hand, drops the final piece of gold in there. Jack kills Barbossa. Then, Jack goes to get hung for all his bad deeds, because, again, he is a pirate. Will and Elizabeth help him escape. And then after that, we go into the in-between of Pirates 1 and 2. Now, this is the time when Jack starts to really realize that, hey, I made this deal with Davy Jones, and I need to start figuring this out. So while the in-between of Pirates 1 and 2 isn't extremely long of a span, not as long as 3 to 4, or even 4 to 5, Jack was doing a lot of stuff in between 1 and 2. So him and his crew were obviously pillaging. They were getting gold. They were going back and forth to Tortuga. They were having fun, but it only lasted so long. They didn't have a lot of luck with finding gold, with finding actual value to what they were looking for. The Aztec gold on the island got washed up, so that was completely gone. So even the non-cursed treasure Jack and his crew couldn't have. They mentioned that in Dead Man's Chest. But what was more alarming to Jack was the 13 years was up, and he knew that Davy Jones would come to get him. And it's kind of uncertain of how much he knew, but he definitely did know. He let himself get captured in order to find the drawing of the key. You see that in the beginning of 2. He actually let that happen to him in order to break into that place in order to get the drawing of the key. So Jack knew the key was the piece to the puzzle that he needed. He needed the key to unlock Davy Jones's chest, to get to his heart. He knew all that stuff, and he knew his 13 years were up. So nothing truly surprised him. I think it did catch him off guard that Bootstrap visited him. So then, you get to the Dead Man's Chest portion of this story. Jack on the run now from the Kraken. He goes to the Pelagostis. Now, what's funny is he actually had been to the Pelagostis before, and he had gotten a little comfortable with their ways of life. He didn't pick up on their language then. He did pick up on their language the second time, but he did use the knowledge he obtained the first time in the second time in order to convince them that he was their god. And obviously that didn't turn out very well for him. They were still going to sacrifice him to free the god from him. But that is where and so it's interesting that he had already met the Pelagostis. It's funny that when you look into the history of Jack, these things always come back. Davy Jones has always been there. Tia Dalma has always been there. The Pelagostis, the mermaids, Angelica, a lot of this stuff has been told. Cutler Beckett, they're all in Jack's past and come back. Salazar even now too. We learned that Jack obviously needs to get to Davy Jones's heart, because if he controls the devil of the seas, he controls the seas, and he won't have to pay up his portion of the bargain. which is its own kind of thing. I've always been a fan of Davy Jones, and it's kind of sad that Jack, because he broke his deal, ends up resulting in Davy Jones dying, and Jack messes all this stuff up for him, just because they made a fair deal and Jack didn't want to honor it. But, so they go to Teodalma, they talk about what really needs to happen next, how it's going to end up being Will that is destined to kill Davy Jones and take his place. Will gets the key from Davy Jones and eventually meets up with Jack on the island. They get the chest, the Kraken attacks, and ultimately Jack ends up dead. Right? The Kraken ends up eating him, and Davy Jones has seemingly won until we find out that Norrington took the heart to Cutler Beckett, which now he has control over Davy Jones. And in the meantime, Jack is dead. And Jack is in the locker. And now the in-between of 2 and 3 is very, very short, so let's just get right through it. Jack goes to Davy Jones' locker, which is hell. It's Pirate's hell, right? And so Jack finds his worst kind of fear. He is stuck on an endless island, an endless sand island, with the Black Pearl, with all of his egos, all of the parts of Jack that exist inside him. Each of them manifest into their own Jack Sparrow. That is what they were showing in Pirates 3. Each of them were a part of him. And because they were all a part of him, and not all together, not without a unified captain, they couldn't get anything going. And so the Black Pearl was always destined to stay on that island. That was Jack's worst fear, was to just have a ship stuck on an island with all of the iterations of him not being able to work together to break out. That is what he endured before even we see Pirates 3. We do obviously see that part in Pirates 3, but the underlying message is that is his worst nightmare, and that's the worst thing that could ever happen to him, is having the Black Pearl stuck, not being able to move, not even being able to get to water. It was Teodalma's help that ended up getting him there. So now we get to Pirates 3, my favorite of the movies, my favorite movie of all time, At World's End. A lot happens here, right? So he gets rescued from Davy Jones' locker. He figures out up is down. He flips the ship around, which is going to come into play, I'm sure, in Pirates 5. Flips the ship. He's back in the real world. They need to get to the Brethren Court to reunite the pirate lords in order to, actually be able to defeat Beckett, Jones, and the entire East India Trading Company. And then, a lot of stuff happens. Jack makes the deal with Beckett that he'll lead him to the Brethren Court, obviously having plans that he's going to try and make it work to destroy them in the process. But this is also when we hear about the history of Jack and Beckett with the whole slave trade. Although that was, again, a deleted scene, we don't actually get to hear that as much as we do get to see Jack holding his wrist for the pirate symbol, so we do get a little reference there. But we do find out that this is where Beckett reminds him of the fact that he was an employee of his at some time, and last time he saw the Black Pearl, it was destroyed and going down into the sea, which obviously then Davy Jones resurrected, and then Jack renamed it the Black Pearl instead of the Wicked Wench, which was actually Beckett's ship in the first place. The Black Pearl, in its origin, is actually a East India Trading Company ship, and it's Lord Cutler Beckett's ship, which is actually kind of funny. So they reconvene the Brethren Court. They have the vote to make a king. So Jack basically makes Elizabeth Pirate King. This is where we see Captain Teague again, only as the keeper of the code. Jack, Elizabeth, and Barbossa meet up with Davy Jones, Beckett, and Will, and they discuss a swap where Jack will be on the ship again with Davy Jones. What's kind of passed up is this long history that Jack and Barbossa have had, all the way to the very first time they met each other, when Jack again did Barbossa a favor and helped him out. And that is where they kind of got their friendship at. That's where they started to trust each other. Then Jack took him on to be his first mate, and then ultimately Barbossa turned on him right when they were going to really achieve greatness by finding the gold. And again, it's actually a blessing in disguise they did that, because Jack wasn't cursed. But that's what I've always appreciated about Pirates 3, is it brings Jack and Barbossa back together more as friends than actual enemies. Especially in this one, they work more together. They have a lot of great moments, including the talk on the island when the Kraken died. A lot of really cool things. But so Jack, goes on Davy Jones' ship, and then they have the epic finale. He fights Davy Jones. Davy Jones kills Will. Jack is shocked, can't stab the heart himself, cannot actually be this leader of the seas that he wanted to be, the one and only Captain Jack Sparrow. living forever, really. He couldn't do it, and so he had Will stab the heart, and then Will took over, and Jack escapes, and then they all say their goodbyes, and we see the conclusion, basically, of the story that we know of it, to then reconvene in 4. But, he says goodbye to Gibbs, in which they utter the line, "Take what you can, give nothing back," which was mentioned in the first one and this one. They never actually had that line before that, when they first met each other, when Gibbs helped Jack out, helped him escape from the ship. They never actually had that. Jack says goodbye to Elizabeth, and then Jack ends up, showing off to these two ladies, and they find out that Barbossa took the pearl again. But this time, Jack took the map, the all-important map, with really all of the supernatural and big landmarks that pirates would want to go after, all on this map, which Barbossa, Jack Sparrow, just, he couldn't believe that he got fooled by him in that. So then we get to this in-between period of Pirates 3 and 4. In between 3 and 4, Jack really only has one thing on his mind, and that's the Fountain of Youth. You see in the map Aqua de Vida. You see the two chalices. You see Ponce de Leon's ship on the map, which I'm very happy that they took all of that and then put it into Pirates 4. I'm sure they had an idea of where they wanted to go at the end of Pirates 3. But in between Pirates 3 and 4, this is really, really where, like, a legend built up about Jack, and that's actually where I love it the most. Because while Jack did make a name for himself early on, and where people, found out about this pirate who was, really sly and made everything work and had all this sorts of luck, and he really did make a name for himself when he was younger, this is when he really developed a whole new kind of level to his name, where people really thought something of him, because his one and only goal was finding the Fountain of Youth. And funny enough, he kind of did. He made it all the way to the island and location that he needed to go to. He made it all the way up to where he made it in 4, to the point where he told Angelica, like, it should be right here. And then Angelica says, "Have you actually ever been to the fountain?" Well, the backstory of that is Jack had been there before. Jack did actually reach that island. Jack actually was, and he's an incredibly smart character if you couldn't have tell by now. He actually memorized how to get there without the map. See, Gibbs had to memorize the map and then throw the map away. Barbossa had to follow the map the whole time and then follow other ships. Jack actually knew how to get to it without the need of a map the second time. He did use it the first time a little bit. But he did reach the island of the fountain, and he did find its location. He couldn't get in, and he didn't really understand the more specifics of it. He never got Ponce de Leon's 2 golden chalices. He never made it to that part of the island, which obviously then, when Blackbeard forces him to, he does. So he had been there before, and this had developed a rumor in the seas that Jack had made it to the Fountain of Youth. That Jack is really the only person who knew how to get there. And this kind of developed into, see, this is more of a hearsay, where it develops into a Jack has seen and been to the Fountain of Youth. That was only partially true. Jack had been to the island and kind of knew the location, but he had never actually seen it or used it before. But this is what people started talking about. And that's really what Jack was doing in between 3 and 4. Then he heard about how Josh Me Gibbs was going to be sentenced to death. He makes his way to London to go help him. That is the in-between. And again, this develops all throughout 4. Blackbeard and Angelica both thinking that Jack had made it to the fountain and really using him to make it. So then we get to 4. Jack rescues Gibbs. He goes on the Queen Anne's Revenge by accident, and he ends up being used by Angelica and Blackbeard. He goes on the adventures with a mermaid. He's leading them to the Fountain of Youth. He strikes up a semi-deal with Barbossa to help him kill Blackbeard. They find the Fountain of Youth, and the ending happens. When he sent Gibbs away, Gibbs got all of the ships in a bottle, and Jack's plan is to open up the ships, which we know that he didn't actually do. He had the ships in a bottle, and whether or not he kept all the other ones, one thing's for sure, he still has the Black Pearls one, as we can tell from the trailers of Dead Men Tell No Tales. He still sees the bottle with the Black Pearl in it. So he hasn't opened it yet. Obviously, he will open it in 5. But Gibbs gets that. Barbossa gets the Queen Anne's Revenge. And Jack walks away very happy. He went through a lot in 4, and he learned a lot of life lessons about what it meant to live forever and if it was necessary. And, he never really even wanted that. He wanted the honor of finding the fountain, of being a person who actually saw it. But once he found out the price that they needed to pay to use it, he had no interest of living forever. He'll live forever in different ways. He'll live forever in his actions and who he is, and being Captain Jack Sparrow. This name and his legacy will always live forever in the seas amongst future generations of pirates. That is his biggest desire, and that is definitely, obviously, what he's gotten throughout this journey so far. So that is where it ends, with him saying, it's a pirate's life for me. In between 4 and 5, we don't know much. We know it's actually been several years in between 4 and 5. Jack, from what we know from the synopsis, he's down his luck. He doesn't have a very impressive ship whatsoever. So in between 4 and 5, obviously a lot of stuff happens that leaves Jack in not a good place. And that's it. So, next week we're going to be covering Jack's role in Pirates 1 through 4, and ultimately what his role is going to be in 5. What do we expect from him, Jack Sparrow, in Pirates 5. Thank you guys so much for watching if you made it this far. I absolutely appreciate it. So we have a collaboration that we're doing with SFZ's channel, and we're going to have a little preview right now of what you can expect. He's going to break up. We had a very long talk, kind of almost a podcast in a way, and he's breaking it up into episodes. The first one is up right now, so here's a little taste of that.
I don't think he would easily forget that stipulation that he said.
He brought Henry on board.
That was probably the thing that got me the most excited or, confused when I first saw the Super Bowl trailer spot. The screenwriters breaking the rules.
We don't know a lot of the stuff that happens. Like, a lot of it is lore, and you got to read the books and stuff.
I think that means a lot for his character.
Well, there you go.
Put it together.
I watched that in a room full of adults and almost lost it.
Put the nail in the coffin and say, all right, we did it. We actually killed his character.
If they would have taken him on board, then they would have switched, like Flip. Would he technically still be alive?
Barbossa's been killed twice. Jack's already been killed.
I don't even think he'd want to come back, even if he could.
So like I said, please go check out that video to support his channel. He's a Pirates fan as well as us. We had that on his channel. There's going to be more videos of us going up on that. And then he's also going to come on our channel and do something special either next week, and we're definitely, in addition, going to have some content after Pirates 5 comes out. But you could also maybe look out for some content next week as well. So go check his channel out, support it, all that stuff. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video, if you found it interesting. I know I left a bunch of stuff out. I didn't want to make it super long. Obviously, this is a very long video anyway, but it could have been easily 10, 15, 20 minutes longer if I included all of the more specifics of, especially his early life, with a lot of the mini things he was doing, a lot of the mini adventures. I didn't want to really weigh this thing down with that. I wanted to get the most important elements of it, and I think I did. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I actually educated you on maybe some of the parts of Jack that you didn't know. Let me know if I missed anything very important, though. Let me know if I got anything wrong. We can have a discussion in the comments below. Make sure you guys keep watching. We got so much stuff coming up. Make sure you keep sending us your questions for the podcast, any topic ideas, any questions in general. Keep leaving those comments. Make sure you subscribe to the Podcast Now, our YouTube channel, for more of this pirate stuff. And I will see you guys back next Friday with Tyler to talk about Jack's role in Pirates 5.